This is the Fearless Pricing Podcast, where we meet and talk about real life pricing experience. I'm your host, Filip Fucic. Pricing is hard. This is a podcast for fearless professionals and those who would like to feel that way. It's an unfortunate truth that most service pricing is created using either guesswork or copying other people's guesswork. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Fearless Pricing Podcast. Today on What I Should Have Charged, we have the great Kelsey Frick. Kelsey, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Kelsey is a freelance translation account manager, French to English subtitler, and a social media consultant based in Glasgow. She is also the co-founder of Team Translator, a positive online community for freelance localization professionals. After 5 years of working in-house, Kelsey went freelance during the pandemic and quickly became known for posting TikTok-style content on LinkedIn. I remember that well, where she's gained a following of over 17,000 people, regularly speaking on topics surrounding freelancing, mental health, marketing, and personal branding. You'll find her featured podcasts such as Meet the Translator, Smart Habits for Translators, ProZ.com podcast, and Translate Stars. Thank you. And go, tell us.
Thank you. Yes, my big blunder started soon after I went freelance. I think I had been freelance for about 6 months at that point. Things, very luckily for me, when I went freelance, things started out. I had a client base early on. I got a couple of really good contracts and stuff, and I didn't have to graft too much to try and build a client base when I first went freelance, which I'm very fortunate to have. But when I went freelance, I fully expected to go freelance and be a subtitler because that's what I was trained in before I went to work for an agency. But when I went freelance, because everybody had already known me as a project and account manager, those are the types of jobs that I kept being offered. And I didn't really realize that you could be a freelance project or account manager. So I was like, okay, this is great. This is obviously what people want. But I had no idea. I had no experience of charging for that. I had no idea what that could even look like, except for a big idea of an hourly rate or something. So I've been working for about 6 months doing project and account management. I did pick up some subtitling jobs and some translation jobs on the side, but then I was approached by basically a dream client, someone who I knew in the industry, who I had always wanted to work for. And they approached me because they had heard from 2 people that they should work for me, which is great. So I had a very good in, and she emailed me. She said, everything looks great. Can we put you on a retainer for like 20 to 25 hours per month? I have a rough idea. I think that's probably what we're going to need as a commitment from you. No, Frank? Yeah. Okay. So naturally, I took what my hourly rate was at that point and multiplied it by 20 and 25 and looked at those 2 numbers. And I picked a number somewhere in between that so that it was a good deal. And we said, okay, that's great. And I said, let's keep things very flexible. Like, it's okay. I understand sometimes if you might not need as many hours in a month, or sometimes you might go over. You just never know, because everything was very new on her side as well. So I wanted to be as flexible as possible. But after a few months of working together, it got to the point it wasn't entirely regular. There were a few months where we hit smack dab bang in the middle of that 20 to 25 hours. But then there were months where I did 10 hours, or there were months where I did 40 hours or 60 hours. And there's months where I did less. I ended up charging less, even though my time was booked for that. I had put aside that time, that 20 to 25 hours in my schedule. If we did 10, then I only charged her at a higher hourly rate, but I only charged her for 10. And then likewise, if I did 60, which is 3 times as much as I had been booked for, I was just like, you know what, let's just times it by 3 and that's fine. So what started as a retainer almost wasn't a retainer. It was just this, if it had somehow fallen in between the 20 to 25 hours, then that was the price that it was. But if it was outside of that, it was anyone's guess, and we negotiated it as we went along. And I realized that this was not the way, it wasn't working for either of us really, because I never knew how many hours I was going to put in. She never knew how much she was going to have to pay me at the end of the month. We weren't working in the same direction. I obviously, as I worked with her longer and knew the ins and outs of the business and how things worked and all of that stuff, I got faster at my job, which meant that I got better at my job. But it also meant that I got paid less because I put in less hours. So we weren't moving in the right direction. So that is my big pricing fail of when I first went freelance.
I love the story because I was hoping you would say that one, because you have two sides with good intentions, not really wanting to rip each other off at all. And what ends up happening from all of those good intentions is that nobody is happy with this, because it's only a retainer if it happens to fall in the ideal. And a retainer is here to basically remove the risks for both you, because you know how much you're going to get paid, and both the employer, because they know how much they'll have to pay. It doesn't remove anything and just complicates things, right? If it was just per hour, it would be more fair and easier to handle. But I'm laughing with you here because I once literally bought a handheld, shoulder held whiteboard this big so that I could show a client in a meeting in their own premises. They didn't have a whiteboard. So I bought one so I can show them how we're going to calculate what they're going to pay me. It was like an hour and a half process. They were very patient with me and they did pay me. However, I went a little overboard, you know? When you start the sentence with, let me draw you a simple chart. Yeah. You know, you've done something wrong here, right?
The similar sort of feeling of, oh, let me Google that for you.
Yes. I think it's a very familiar story of yours that you had work as soon as you went out. So you switched to freelance and it worked because you had enough jobs. This is a very familiar story that is also dangerous. Now, you did something that made it better. Whether you knew that you were doing it or not, that's another question. But you immediately got yourself involved in a community in a way. So it wasn't your team translator immediately, but you went out there and you met new people. Because what happens is we're all afraid. I did that as well. We're all afraid of stepping out as freelancers because maybe there's not going to be enough work. But we do have some existing networks, even as we work for somebody else. And those networks will carry you, just not indefinitely. Networks get depleted because as you're out, you get this wonderful story. You told your boss to stuff it, and more or less, and friends tell friends, and I was searching for that kind of a person. But these things, they go by, and then nobody has 15 different things for you to do. They have one. And then first you spend the friends and the friends of friends and friends, fools, and family. And then what? And by the time that you see that there's no more work incoming, it's too late to start building a community. You can't afford it. One thing that people really should do is to start building a community as soon as they get out, because communities take time. It's like exercise. Nothing is going to happen if you exercise really hard one day. Nothing. No matter how hard you try, how hard you push yourself, absolutely nothing is going to change. And we're bad at these kinds of decisions because everything's fine. The first year of business is not the worst year of business. The second year usually. So I think the median is about 18 months until you run out of a business. And it almost cost me my current business. BNI got me out of it. So the business networking network. And as Corona came and we couldn't meet in person, I found so many different ways to do networking online. And it's still one of the two major ways in which I get clients. So I think that's an important point, right?
Yeah.
So you did TikToks for LinkedIn. Anything else that you did to get yourself out there? Before we continue, I'd like to suggest two things. Firstly, if this is the first time you're tuning in, I'd love for you to subscribe and hear the next story in a week. And second, if you feel you could do with a little more fearless pricing content, look in the show notes for the link to the popular, short, and sometimes funny biweekly newsletter. That's it. Let's get back to the show.
Really just did a deep dive on LinkedIn. When I went freelance, it was unexpected. I handed in my notice and then I was jobless a month later. And my original plan was actually to go freelance for a bit and pay the bills before I found my dream job. And I didn't want to be picky, wanted to see what was out there and stuff. But the longer that I worked for myself, the more that I realized I really liked being my own boss and no one telling me what to do. And I could say no to whatever I wanted and all of that stuff. So I was like, actually, now I'm going to be freelance. And when I realized that, I was like, what means that I'm also my own marketing department. So just trying to know how difficult the translation industry can be to get into, even if you've studied translation. Most people are coming out of their programs and stuff, not even knowing that they have to like price per word or like the industry standard and that kind of stuff. And so I was like, what I can do is I start getting on LinkedIn, posting content that's helpful to other people in my community and my network, and reach down the ladder and bring people up with me, because I've been in the industry for 5 years and I was able to learn about the industry in a really safe space in that I was working for an agency. So I could see I didn't have to, if I messed up, I was still getting a salary, right? The people that are trying to go freelance now, I thought, well, however I can help them, that's going to be good, because that accomplishes two things, right? One, it builds that network of colleagues that you can have, and by nature of the translation industry, literally all over the world. But two, if any jobs come up, if anybody is looking for a project manager, translation specialist, project manager, or an account manager, or anything like that, they can go, well, this person has taught me all about the translation industry. I think they'd probably be perfect for this job. And so I was really like, I need to do LinkedIn. I need to make sure that my profile is up to date. I need to make sure that I've got all the recommendations that I can on my profile, so I look like I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I knew that I knew what I was talking about. But
You need to look at it. That's not the
exactly.
same. Life would be so much simpler if people who knew what they were doing looked like they knew what they were doing.
And because of the nature of the translation industry as well, I'm often dealing with clients that are based in English-speaking countries and they want to translate their content into French or Spanish or Japanese or Russian or anything like that. And by the very nature of it, they're unable to evaluate the products that they're given. So much of the industry is built on trust. And if I can say, look, I've got 20 people on my LinkedIn giving me a recommendation that I do my job well, then that's going to count for a heck of a lot more than me just saying, look, I know what I'm talking about. So there was so many different approaches to that. And then on top of all that, I was like, I can't post about translation every day. That gets boring. I am my own person. I don't like to take myself too seriously. I like to laugh at myself. I like to make jokes and stuff. And it was lockdown. I was getting really into Instagram Reels, which is basically a TikTok knockoff. And I thought, you know what? I bet I can do one of these. And I tried it. And I was really scared before I posted the first one, because I was like, I could do this on Instagram, but I didn't want to like disperse my reach. I thought I really want to put this content on LinkedIn, which felt really scary at the time because I was still just scratching the surface of what LinkedIn could be. I think I was still very much in that mindset of LinkedIn is only really like a place where people go to find work and that kind of stuff. So I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to post it. It could go horribly wrong. And if it does, then I will have just learned something, or it could go great. And I'm on to something here because I haven't seen someone else do that, specifically applying it to like the translation industry and like freelancing as like a wider audience. So I posted it. Luckily, people seem to like it. And now I post one every Friday. And yeah, it's just become something that is a talking point for when people talk to me. It's made me much more approachable because they see me moving around and interacting and laughing at myself and singing, lip syncing, all of these things. It makes me so much more approachable. I don't become this kind of like untouchable, like profile picture that all of this stuff. And that's for both my colleagues in the translation industry, but also potential clients. Everybody can feel comfortable reaching out to me and sending me a message and that kind of stuff. So if I make that barrier to entry, that barrier between me and you, because we're over the internet and you don't know me and out there you send a message to me, it makes that barrier almost invisible, right? Because I'm there. I'm already there being approachable. I'm handing you this video of me acting like a fool. You're allowed to laugh at me just because I'm already laughing at me. And yeah, there were so many different facets of it. And it also just was a great way to build my confidence as well, because it meant that if I laugh at myself first, then you can't laugh at me because I'm already doing it.
True. And what changed in your pricing that made you happy with it? Because you obviously weren't happy then and you look much happier now. By the way, you tell your story, you tell it with humor, and I've seen many things. So tell me, what changed in your pricing that you're happy with today?
After like some discussion, some back and forth, I'm no longer working with this client, but there was a bit of a transitionary period for when I stopped working with them, but she still needed a little bit of my support here and there and stuff. And I thought, this hourly thing just isn't working. It's not a true representation of my expertise here. And we both don't know how much work it's going to be. We both don't know what that's going to look like. And so I sat down and I started putting together a few packages. There was one track where I knew that she needed a little bit of help with the translation tool that we were using. And I was really familiar with it. So I was like, okay, look, there's 3 options here. You've got the basic, the pro and the premium or whatever, your basic 3 tiers kind of thing. And it was like, I'll be available for half the day for the basic one and I'll answer questions on Slack. And then the middle one was like, you got me the full day and I'll jump on a video call with you. And the final one was like, you got the full day, I'll record looms and stuff and I'll write SOPs. Basically a general package system. But then it just meant that she could say, okay, I know that we've got these projects coming up. I think I'm going to need support in these ways. I'll say, I'll go for the medium package this month and then figure it out for next month or whatever. But I'll tell you that you're able to schedule your time. And it ended up working out better for both of us because it's just a flat price. So she knows exactly how much she was paying every month. I knew how much I was getting paid every month. And I was also incentivized to solve problems as quickly as possible. It was very much from the viewpoint of like, we're moving in the same direction, we're trying to achieve the same goals. Because in reality, what she would want is for me to solve the problems as quickly as possible and for her to know how much she has to pay me every month. And that's also my incentive. I want to know how much I'm getting paid every month. And I want to solve the problems as quickly as possible because that's what's good for me. So yes, that's what ended up being the solution. And it's something that I'm now carrying with me into negotiations with all of my current and future clients as well, turning from an hourly rate into a value price. This is what we decide is the services that I'm giving. This is the value of them over the course of a month.
Okay. The way that you described can also be called an output based, not an input based, because what they're getting is they're getting looms and they're getting as many as it gets, right? As many as they need.
Yeah.
That's an output based thing. Cool. It sounds definitely like the incentives are better than the hourly. And as you said, people don't really know how to charge. Their institutions, which teaches the skills, somehow always teach us from the perspective that we're going to get a job anyway. Somebody else is going to take care of the marketing. Somebody else is going to take care of the paychecks. We just have to do our work, which I can absolutely understand the bargain. I can. And I'm perfectly fine with somebody saying, yeah, that's my jam. I want to not think about anything that is not directly connected to my craft. However, the exchange of the parts, how much money you have to fork over for that deal can feel abusive. So I would prefer if people actually knew that they had a choice. If sometimes you don't, of course, but when you do, it should be clear that you have a choice. You can say, I'm happy to fork over 7/8 of what my work makes for not having to think about these things, because it can be more than that, but it can also be less. I don't know, but I'm endlessly frustrated by just how much we don't get told when it comes to commercializing what we do. As experts or people who specialize in any area whatsoever, it's the same in design, it's the same in architecture, it's the same in even in law, even with CPAs who are really supposed to understand the money flows and everything, hourly billing all the way. It's changing, everything is slowly changing, but I think I wouldn't call an education in a trade complete until you know how to charge for it on your own.
Yeah.
And then if you say this is too hard, I want to enter a bargain where somebody else does all of this, gets the clients and gets them to pay, and fine, do it. But there is a choice. And today there is really a choice, a much greater one that people usually realize. And I'm very happy to hear you talk about your experience of inadvertently, hard word, stumbling into something that is really great, that really works for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It is really frustrating because the amount that I've built my personal brand and my content on the fact that this kind of stuff hasn't been taught. I would say the people that approach me the most about entering the industry and how to make a living as a freelance translator and what that looks like and navigating the industry are the people that are fresh out of MA programs, which I think is so disheartening. They've maybe done a BA in translation or at least in languages, and then they've gone to do an MA, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe even longer in translation. And they've come out not knowing how to be a freelance translator, which I think is often the natural next step in your translation career if you've gone to study translation. For a lot of countries, in-house jobs are few and far between, or if you go in and be a project manager or project coordinator or something like that. But to me, logically, the most natural transition after you do an MA in translation is to be a freelance translator. And the fact that places are teaching how this looks like or how to, or any sort of business skills. Even when I did my BA in translation, even though it was a great degree and I'm glad that I had it, everything was being set up for me to use my language skills in a job. Maybe I was going to, I don't know, go into business and I was going to be speaking with French businesses, or I was going to, I don't know, like anything else. It was just like, you're going to do anything else besides translation. And so I think if that's what we're always hearing before we get into the industry, then when you do get in the industry, like it's no wonder that you undervalue your services. It's no wonder that you're not feeling as confident about your skills as you could be, because you've been told this whole time, even though you've been studying it, that what you're doing isn't worthwhile. And so not only do you not have the skills or the business knowledge to price your services, but also you're going in and you're not valuing yourself. Of course, you're going to end up in deals that might not work well, or you're going to end up learning the hard way for a lot of things and stuff. And so it's a shame.
It used to be in the olden days of trades, historically, you were a helper, you studied, and then once you were done with studying, you would go on a trip to try out at least, 8, 10, 12, depending on different places and work under different masters, let's say. So tradesmen, full tradesmen. And then you could come back and do your masterpiece, whatever it is, to prove that you mastered your craft, and then you were a free craftsman. So yes, I think it's still the natural next step. You study, then you're done with studying, then you have to try it out. You try a little of this, you try a little of that. That's way better position to be a freelancer and to be able to address this phase while you still have kind of a student way of living and student expenses and all of this. You need to be able to experience it then, not first go into, get locked in, get frustrated, and then get basically run out, maybe incurring some debt. And now what, right? Now you don't have to have the wherewithal to try things out. And Kelsey, I've spoken about this at the beginning, but tell me, where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn at Kelsey Frick. You can find me on Instagram at frickin' freelance. And you can also find me on TikTok, which I have now just said, yes, I will open a TikTok. So you can find me on TikTok at freaking freelance as well.
Very cool. Thank you very much for being here and sharing these experiences with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
I thought that was a great story, and I think people are going to learn much from it. Folks, you heard her. Go and find her, and I hope I'll see you again on the show.
Thanks, Philip.
See you. Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you would like to hear more, simply subscribe. Until next time, your host, Filip Vojic.